Hey friend, Colin here from Sumthins Recording, and today I'm going to show you how to mix synth bass. We're going to be looking at mixing synth bass today using just an EQ, and this is going to help you get your low end under control from a synthesized or more programmed style bass track. But before we dive in here, if you're ready to go a little bit deeper into the mixing process in its entirety and really start to hone your workflow as an audio engineer, then I have just the thing for you. It is my 7-step mixing checklist, and it's just a simple PDF that will walk you through the entire mixing process step by step to help you get professional and radio-ready mixes without any more of the guesswork and without any more of the hassle. It is a completely free guide, and you can get access to that by clicking the link below in the video description. Now let's jump in here and take a look at this track. So I've been working through this song here. We kind of just finished tracking it, and I've got the initial mix up, and I wanted to show you this synth bass part because it was kind of an interesting situation where in the middle of the song we move from a more traditional sounding bass, not necessarily traditional, but a more normal styled bass, to a synth bass in the middle of the song. And I wanted you to see how we got this bass to sit and be smooth transitioning from a more traditional style bass guitar. So here's our synth bass, and then I'll show you that transition as well. So that's what our synth bass is doing in this verse here. And if we go back now, let me play you a little bit of the normal bass here, and you can hear how it transitions from this bass guitar, our DI and amp, to the more synthesized bass here. So you can hear, even though we're trading off basses, our low end still stays pretty consistent and pretty controlled. So what we're going to look at here is, all we're going to look at is this single EQ that we have going on the synth bass. The nice thing about programmed bass guitars or synthesized bass parts is that they're usually pretty EQ'd and pretty sculpted on the way in. So let me solo up this bass part here. You can hear, here's our raw bass sound just as it came in. So that's a great sounding bass right off the bat. It has a little bit too much sub area for me, and it's not quite focused on the fundamental, but the mid-range energy, the top end, it's definitely going to cut through in the track. So all we need to do is take care of our low end and make sure it sits right inside the mix as well as compared to the bass guitar we already have going on. So the first thing I'm doing here is throwing in a high pass filter. Now if we look at it compared to the traditional bass guitar here, it's a little bit lower than the high pass I have going here because I wanted to leave a little bit more of the sub information here on the synth bass so you know it's a programmed bass part and it has that lower octave in it. But I didn't want to go so far down that suddenly there's a huge shift in the bottom end. So we're only about 10 cycles or so down from where our normal bass guitar is. So let me A-B that for you. Here's without our high pass filter, and then I'll kick it in. We're at 56 hertz here, 12 dB per octave. So you can hear we're cutting out that lower octave, all that sub area that's below about 50 hertz here. We don't need that in this track. If it was, a more hip hop style track or a more EDM style track, I would leave that lower octave in here. But this is leaning more towards, rock, pop rock, 80s rock here. The next thing we're going to do here is we're going to emphasize the fundamental above the sub area. So you could see there was a lot of energy going on around, 40, down here around 30. We want to emphasize this area around 70 and 80 here because that's what's going to match best with our DI and our amp bass here. So let's take a listen here. Without this boost, we're at 70 hertz, so we're pulling up just under the fundamental of our other bass guitar here. If we look at the EQ on our DI and our amp track, you can see we're boosting a ton of 80 hertz here because that's our fundamental. That's that feeling we want to hear in our chest. On the synth bass, we're going just below that, so still keeping it lower than our normal bass, but making sure we're still in the same ballpark here. I'm gonna hit play, you can hear without it, and then I'll kick this boost in. 4 dB, 70 hertz. Now our bass is feeling big, it's feeling like it's gonna sit in the track, it's not gonna have too much bottom end that it throws off this mix or the genre of the track. Let's take a listen, I'll A-B this EQ inside the track. You can hear we throw our EQ in, just that high pass filter and that little bump at 70 hertz focuses the low end here on the synth bass so it sits properly inside this mix. We don't need all that sub area, we don't need that 40, that 30 hertz coming through on this. There's nothing down there and it's just gonna cause problems with the balance in our track. We want our kick drum, then our bass guitar. If our synth bass suddenly comes in with, a bunch of 30 hertz or a bunch of 40 hertz, then suddenly we're shifting the power balance in the low end in this track, and that's gonna throw the listener off, and it's not gonna sit quite right. So one more time here, I'll A-B this, and then I wanna show you how we're matching the low end on our DI and our amp versus our synth bass. It's just that little shift from all the energy being below 50 to suddenly being around 70 and 80 hertz that helps this bass guitar, this synth bass part, sit properly inside this track. Now, what I'm doing to make sure this sits right with the traditional bass guitar we have going on is on the main bus here, on the main output, I have an EQ set to about 100 hertz, 99.5, and I've got it 24 dB per octave slope. And all I'm doing is wiping off everything above 100 hertz, so I'm just listening to the bottom end here. And then what I'm doing is I'm going to solo up the bass guitar and the synth bass, and I want to hear the transition between them and see if there's, more prominence on one versus the other, or if we need to boost more on one to get it to match in the low end here. So take a listen. Here's our DI and amp going to our synth bass just 100 hertz below. So you can hear they're pretty well balanced. We have that extra bit of low end on the synth bass because we're boosting right below our DI and our amp, but that just gives them a little bit of differentiation. So we know, okay, now a synth bass is coming in, now a programmed bass part is coming in versus the bass that we had before. It gives it a more alive feel that doesn't have that lower octave. It doesn't have that 40, 30 going on as well. One more time, take a listen to this transition from our DI and amp to our synth bass. Just a little bit of reorienting the frequency ranges on the synth bass, making sure we don't have that emphasis on the 50 hertz and the 40 hertz. We put our high pass filter in, a little bump at 70, make sure we're listening to that 70, that 80 hertz range, and emphasizing the fundamental that matches with the rest of this track. I hope that was helpful for you. As I mentioned at the beginning of the video, if you're ready to take your mixes to the next level and really start dialing in your workflow as an audio engineer, then I have just the tool for you, and it is completely free. It is my 7-step mixing checklist, and you can get access to that by clicking the link below in the video description. It's going to help you get more professional mixes in less time. Thank you so much for watching here today, and I will see you in the next video.